Imagine standing in a room where every single monitor is just flashing red.
Yeah, and the alarms are just this constant chaotic noise.
Right. And you aren't looking at a patient who came in with, like, a minor cough or a slight ache. You're looking at a human being whose lungs have simply stopped pulling in oxygen.
Their heart is barely managing to pump blood.
Exactly. Kidneys completely shutting down. You are looking at a biological machine in a state of catastrophic total system failure.
It's a heavy place to start.
It is. But today, for this deep dive, we are stepping directly into that room. We're going to look at human health through the eyes of someone who spent 20 years standing at the absolute end of the road for the human body.
We are. We're examining this deeply fascinating perspective from the late Egyptian physician, Dr. Diaa Al-Awadi.
Right.
He was an intensive care unit consultant. And the translated excerpts we have from his interviews, they reveal this theory of human biology that is radically simple, but also, highly analytical.
And frankly, a bit chilling when you follow his logic all the way through.
Well, absolutely. So our mission today is to break down his intense medical background, his pointed critique of what modern medicine calls therapeutic nutrition, and finally, his three inputs theory.
Which is this framework that attempts to explain why chronic diseases are not just skyrocketing today, but like hitting people at much, much younger ages.
Yeah, the age factor is a huge part of this.
So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting nutritional advice out there, this deep dive is going to strip all that noise down to a fundamentally simple, undeniable equation about human biology.
But before we get into his overarching theories, we really have to establish the sheer gravity of his day-to-day environment.
Right, because Dr. El-Awadi was not operating out of some sunny wellness clinic.
No, not at all.
He wasn't prescribing green smoothies or chatting about general longevity. He was in the ICU.
The source text highlights that he had between 19 and 20 years of experience in these literally life or death scenarios.
That's 2 decades of emergencies.
Right. He graduated top of his class, earned his PhD in Mahdi incredibly early in his career, and was a former staff member at Ain Shams University.
And beyond his own clinical practice, he also supervised around 1,000 master's and PhD theses.
Yes, specifically focused on ICU and pain management.
1,000 theses. I mean, let's just pause on that. When you supervise 1,000 distinct research projects in a field as critical as intensive care,
You're exposed to a staggering volume of edge cases.
exactly, systemic collapses, anomalous data points. You are basically absorbing the aggregate data of thousands of human bodies failing in real time.
What's fascinating here is the psychology of that vantage point.
Yeah, let's unpack that. I keep thinking of it like, okay, it reminds me of a master mechanic, but specifically a mechanic who only ever sees cars after the engine has completely detonated on the highway at like 80 miles an hour.
Right, they're doing oil changes.
Exactly. This mechanic never sees the slow, gradual wear and tear. They don't deal with a tiny scratch on the bumper or, a squeaky brake pad. They are faced with catastrophic, multi-system failure.
And because they have to somehow rebuild that entire exploded engine, they're forced to look at the vehicle entirely differently.
Right.
You see, the nature of the intensive care unit actively strips away the silos that we usually rely on in modern medicine.
Like the different departments.
Exactly. If you go to a standard hospital today, the institution is highly compartmentalized. You see a cardiologist for a heart murmur.
Right.
You see a pulmonologist for a persistent cough, a gastroenterologist for digestive issues. The body is treated as a collection of separate, isolated organs.
But in the ICU, that luxury just disappears completely.
It does. Dr. El-Awadi emphasized that he was entirely responsible for the patient's complete system. He had to manage them medically. He had to manage their ventilation, meaning the physical, mechanical process of breathing.
And he had to manage their total nutrition.
Right, all of it.
It's like he had to be the conductor of an orchestra where every single instrument was not just playing out of tune, but actively on fire.
That is a great way to put it.
I mean, you couldn't just write a prescription for the liver and ignore how that medication might crash the kidneys 20 minutes later.
And when you're forced to manage the entire biological ecosystem in a state of crisis day in and day out, your brain naturally starts to look for systemic root causes.
You stop asking, why did this specific organ fail?
Exactly. And you start asking, why is the entire underlying structure of these bodies collapsing simultaneously?
Which brings us to this really specific turning point he highlights around 2009 and 2010.
Right.
After years of operating in this intense environment, he began asking some incredibly heavy questions about the demographic shift he was witnessing.
He was looking around his ICU and wondering why the overall volume of disease was increasing so aggressively.
But more importantly, he was deeply alarmed by the fact that these catastrophic total system failures were happening to patients at much, much younger ages than historically normal.
Right, seeing people in their 30s with total organ failure. It shouldn't happen.
Exactly. And observing that demographic shift led him to scrutinize the mainstream solutions being offered to the public at the time.
Which brings us to his critique of therapeutic nutrition.
Yes. He directed a very sharp, logical critique at that exact phrase. He looked at the phrasing itself, therapeutic.
Because a therapy, by definition in the medical world, is a treatment intended to cure or significantly mitigate a disorder.
And he points out a glaring paradox here. Standard nutritional doctors and, public health campaigns, they're constantly promoting the benefits of eating vegetables, eggs, chicken, basic whole foods.
Right.
And they package this advice as therapeutic. Yet as they broadcast these dietary guidelines louder and louder, the rates of severe chronic disease just continue to multiply exponentially.
It's a huge disconnect.
But wait, I need to push back on this on behalf of, anyone listening right now who just ate a salad for lunch.
Go for it.
Eating vegetables and lean protein is like the gold star advice of the modern health world. Is Dr. El-Awadi suggesting that eating vegetables is somehow bad? Or is he saying that the standard advice is missing the actual scale of the biological crisis?
Oh, he's absolutely pointing to a massive medical blind spot. He is not criticizing the biological value of a vegetable.
Okay, good.
Right. He's criticizing the profound inadequacy of the medical paradigm surrounding it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, imagine a ship that has a massive gaping hole in the hull and it's rapidly taking on water.
Okay.
Handing someone a bucket and telling them to scoop the water out isn't inherently bad advice. I mean, scooping water is a helpful action.
Sure.
But if you call that bucket a therapeutic solution while the ship continues to sink faster than ever, you're denying the reality of the whole.
Wow. Yeah. If the therapy was actually working on a systemic level, his ICU wouldn't have been overflowing with 30-year-olds experiencing multi-organ failure.
Exactly. The sheer volume of incoming patients proved that the underlying cause of the disease surge was completely outpacing the standard nutritional advice. Right. The fact that the disease burden was growing concurrently with the explosion of this therapeutic nutrition industry meant that the medical community was fundamentally misunderstanding the root cause.
Telling people to eat more chicken was not stopping the catastrophic failures he was treating.
So he zoomed all the way out. He bypassed all the endless debates about, carbohydrates versus fats or whatever the latest superfood trend was.
And he looked at the basic biological reality of human existence.
Right.
He reduced the entire human experience down to what he calls the three inputs theory of life. And I have to say, it's a brilliant way to cut through the noise.
It's so elegant.
He states a core biological fact. Humans, as living machines, only have three inputs from the outside world: water, air, and food.
That is the entire list.
That's it. Every single cell in your body, every biological process that keeps you alive, is built and maintained solely by what comes through those three specific channels.
Let's methodically break down the nature of those three inputs, starting with water.
Okay.
The fundamental chemistry of water is fixed. It is H2O. While there might be trace minerals or, slight variations in purity, the core chemical signature of water has remained a constant throughout the entirety of human evolution.
Right. The human body knows exactly how to process it.
Exactly. As an individual, you cannot fundamentally alter the chemistry of water. You can only really control the quantity you ingest.
And air functions under a very similar biological constraint.
Yeah, its chemistry is essentially fixed. Roughly 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, trace amounts of other gases.
You don't get to, mix your own custom blend of air in the morning.
Right. You can't just adjust the dials on your oxygen intake. And furthermore, you cannot easily control the exact volume you breathe.
Because your autonomic nervous system just handles the respiratory drive based on your exertion levels.
Yes. And your physical environment dictates the mix of gases available. You are essentially a passive recipient of the air input.
Which leaves us with the third and final input, food.
The wild card.
The ultimate wild card. Food is entirely unique in this biological equation. It is the absolute only input that humans take in daily, regularly and predictably, where the chemical composition is highly variable.
And entirely within our manual control.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's visualize this for a second, just to see how radical that difference actually is.
Okay, lay it out.
Imagine your body is a highly advanced, heavily automated bioreactor, and it's contained inside a sealed glass dome.
I like this.
The environment inside the dome requires perfect equilibrium to function, and you are keeping this bioreactor running by pumping resources through 3 distinct dedicated tubes.
Okay, tube A, B, and C.
Exactly. Tube A is for water, tube B is for air, tube C is for food. Now, tubes A and B are completely locked by the manufacturer.
The factory settings are fixed.
Right. The chemical formulas are stable, and you cannot tamper with them. But tube C, the food tube, that tube has a massive unlocked manual override panel attached to it.
But anyone can just walk up to it.
Yes, you have total access to that panel, and you can pump literally whatever chemical combination you want through it multiple times a day, every single day of your life.
This raises an important question, right? When you frame it that way, you start to realize the immense danger of that manual override.
It's terrifying.
We spend so much of our time and anxiety focused on external factors that we barely control. We worry about ambient stress or genetic predispositions.
Or the general pollution in our cities.
Exactly. Yet we completely ignore the profound reality that we are constantly manually overriding our own body's chemistry through the food tube.
So because we're the ones changing the chemistry of the single variable input we have, we are essentially beta testing new chemical combinations on our own organs every single day.
We are. To understand the mechanism of why this causes such a crisis, we have to look at how the body processes foreign materials.
Right, what actually happens inside the dome when we start pulling levers at random? What's the physical mechanism that connects the modern food to the 30-year-old ending up on a ventilator?
Well, our biological machinery, the liver, the kidneys, the vascular system, evolved over millions of years to identify and break down a very specific, narrow range of organic compounds.
The natural stuff.
Right. So when you introduce a novel synthetic chemical into the body, perhaps a new artificial preservative, an industrial emulsifier, or a synthetically altered fat.
Things the body has literally never seen before in human history.
Exactly. The body's filtration organs do not have the evolutionary blueprint or the specific enzymes required to break that compound down cleanly.
So the organs are essentially looking at an unrecognizable barcode and panicking because they just don't know how to categorize or dismantle the material.
That's a perfect way to put it. And when the liver attempts to process these unrecognizable compounds, it often creates toxic metabolic byproducts.
Oh, wow.
These byproducts circulate through the bloodstream, and they cause cellular friction. The immune system flags these foreign materials as microscopic invaders, which triggers a state of chronic systemic inflammation.
Right, so it's not just a passing irritation.
No, it is this relentless, low-grade biological friction that slowly wears down the organ walls, corrupts the vascular tissue, and degrades the cellular machinery.
Over years and decades.
Yes, this constant inflammatory state leads directly to the catastrophic structural collapses Dr. Al-Awadi was managing in the ICU.
It's like trying to run a high-performance software operating system, but every single day, you intentionally inject a few lines of corrupted, unrecognizable code into the mainframe.
Yeah.
You might not see the system crash on day 1 or even day 50. The software might find workarounds to keep the basic programs running.
It compensates.
Exactly. But every single time the system processes that bad code, it generates hidden errors. And eventually, those errors compound, the internal architecture degrades, and the entire operating system just blue screens without any warning.
That analogy completely validates Dr. Al-Awadi's initial horror at seeing those increasingly younger patients experiencing total organ failure.
Right.
In fact, it perfectly illustrates his final chilling observation in the source text. He notes that as the chemical variability of what he calls foodstuff increases in our modern era, diseases are increasing in the exact same parallel trajectory.
They are mirroring each other.
We are literally watching the physical manifestation of those compounded software errors.
And he mentions that we are actually inventing new names for new diseases.
Right, we aren't just seeing more of the same traditional ailments.
Conditions that simply did not exist in the medical literature 50 years ago or were considered incredibly rare edge cases are now commonplace.
The scientific and medical communities are observing this rapid acceleration in real time. They're watching as total system failure occurs earlier and earlier in the human lifespan.
It's just wild to think about. The The sheer volume of novel chemical combinations we are producing completely outpaces the evolutionary capacity of human biology.
Which brings his critique of standard therapeutic nutrition into incredibly sharp focus.
Yeah.
If you are running an uncontrolled global chemistry experiment on the human body, telling a patient to simply eat a vegetable does not neutralize the thousands of synthetic compounds they are simultaneously ingesting.
Right. The biological friction continues completely unabated.
We are the only species on the planet that fundamentally alters the chemistry of our primary biological input before consuming it.
It's true, no other animal does that.
Dr. Al-Awadi's time in the ICU showed him that the catastrophic failures he was treating were not random acts of tragic misfortune.
No.
They were the highly predictable, logical conclusion of a population that had radically compromised the integrity of its single most critical input variable.
The engine didn't just randomly explode on the highway.
Right.
The driver had spent 2 decades pouring experimental combustible fluids directly into the gas tank, and Dr. El-Awadi was just the mechanic tasked with the impossible job of putting the shattered pieces back together.
The ICU isn't some isolated room completely disconnected from normal daily life. From his perspective, the ICU is simply the final inevitable destination for a lifetime of compromised inputs.
That is an incredibly heavy realization to process. Let's take a moment to recap this entire journey for you listening, because the logic here demands serious reflection.
It really does.
We started by looking through the eyes of a highly decorated intensive care consultant who spent nearly 2 decades dealing exclusively with human biology in a state of catastrophic collapse.
Right, and we explored how the encompassing nature of the ICU forced him to abandon that fragmented, siloed view of modern medicine. He couldn't just treat individual symptoms, he had to keep the entire organism alive.
Which drove him to search for systemic root causes. And that search led to his realization that standard therapeutic nutrition was failing to address the true scale of the health crisis because it ignored the fundamental changes happening to our food supply.
Exactly, which ultimately led him to the elegant simplicity of the three inputs theory. We require air, water, and food to survive.
With air and water remaining largely fixed in their chemical composition, food emerges as the singular, highly variable chemical input that is driving the unprecedented rise in novel, early-onset chronic diseases.
It is a stark medical reality.
But for you listening, there is a profoundly empowering takeaway hidden within this framework. Yes, the landscape of modern food is incredibly complex and, deeply compromised.
Oh, without a doubt.
But according to the mechanics of Dr. El-Awadi's theory, you are the one sitting at the control panel.
Right.
You can't fundamentally change the chemistry of the air you're breathing as you walk down the street today, and your biological need for water is just a fixed law of nature. But you have absolute, total sovereignty over tube C.
You do.
You are the sole gatekeeper of the single variable input that dictates the long-term structural integrity of your body.
And if we take Dr. El-Awadi's theory to its absolute logical conclusion, that these novel chemical inputs are literally forcing the medical community to invent new names for unprecedented diseases, it leaves us with a deeply provocative thought to carry forward.
Oh, I like this. What is it?
Think about this. When you walk down the grocery store aisle later today and you look at all the brightly colored packages bearing complex, paragraph-long ingredient lists of unpronounceable chemicals, you have to ask yourself, are you simply looking at food?
Okay.
Or are you actually walking through a preview of the medical textbooks of the year 2050?
Wow.
The next time you pick up a heavily processed item, ask yourself, is this a chemical compound my biological machinery actually evolved to process, or am I volunteering my liver to beta test a novel industrial additive?
That is the ultimate question to carry with you. Are you feeding the machine or are you corrupting the code?
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the brilliant, challenging, and deeply necessary perspective of Dr. Diaa Al-Awadi. Keep looking closely at the systems we take for granted, keep questioning the daily habits that shape your biology, and most importantly, guard the control panel for Tube C. We will catch you on the next deep dive.